let's finally talk about these alternatives to Claude Code that I keep mentioning that I will tell you about. It is good to know your options. I think there are essentially three options. There are others like Grok and the Chinese models that I mentioned earlier. I personally haven't used those, so I'll just talk about the ones that I've used. So essentially Claude Code Codex, which is the OpenAI ChatGPT version. Right now that's ChatGPT 5 or 5.2. It may be something different by the time you see this. Gemini CLI is Google's version, so Google's AI models are called Gemini for the most part. Currently it's Gemini Pro 3 and Gemini Flash 3. Again, that will probably change. The concepts transfer and the models are really quite similar. In terms of the raw intelligence of these three models, they're all roughly the same. So Codex, OpenAI, all of these really, they just have slightly different model strength, slightly different personalities, if you like, obviously different pricing. The OpenAI ecosystem, so maybe you're just more familiar with that. Maybe you've got memories in there. They do have some really good things. I like using the ChatGPT voice app on my iPhone for walks and so on. Theirs is, for me, one of the best voice options. Although I've heard the Grok voice is very good. I haven't tried it yet. And I've mentioned skills before. I'm going to talk about skills a lot more in the coming videos. OpenAI can now use skills. So skills, in the sense that we're talking about, were invented by Anthropic. They are sort of built in and native to Claude Code. You can now use them inside of Codex, but just not as well. And personally, I want to use Anthropic because they created all of this stuff and they are improving upon it at a huge rate. Now, Google is a long, long way from dead. About a year ago, everybody was saying like Google's missed the boat, Google's dead. Not at all. Their models are absolutely superb. There was a very long time before I moved to Claude Code that I used Gemini as my main model for writing the PMAX script and 8020 agent and a lot of the other coding I was doing with AI, let's say a year ago. They do have a generous free tier. It integrates really well with all the other Google stuff, Sheets, Docs, Gmail, Google Ads, obviously. Maybe less mature, but probably not really anymore with Gemini 3. It's a pretty solid model. Again, slightly different capabilities. I think Google have got the best image model currently, January 2026. Nano Banana Pro is absolutely superb for images. And again, that Google ecosystem. They're all very similar, like I said, but Anthropic created MCP originally back in 2025. That's sort of maybe, we'll talk about it another day. We don't need to worry about that now, but skills is for me the main thing. Skills, I think, are how most people are going to be using AI or how you're able to get a lot of stuff done very easily, because a skill is essentially just a big prompt that the machine remembers and knows how to use. And then we can update those over time so that the machine gets better and better at the tasks that you ask it to do. Anthropic created them and they are, again, improving them rapidly. And then it's just the way that they handle context. We talked a little bit in an earlier video about the concept of the context window. If you remember, I drew sort of a container. Think of it as a shoebox or something on its end. And it fills up from top to bottom. And as we have conversations back and forth, we use up more and more context and we have less and less space available over time. Claude just handles the context window very intelligently and very well, especially with skills. The others do a good job, but I just think that Claude, because they've sort of invented this concept of skills in particular, they're kind of the best at sort of managing that and making everything just work really, really well. So Claude.md files. So I mentioned Markdown before. I said that we've got loads of files here. They're basically text files with this funky editing or formatting system called Markdown. So that's what the .md is. It's just a Markdown file. And the Claude.md, which is how that's pronounced, file is the main file that Claude understands what to do when it is inside your code or your code base, your collection of files and documents and so on. Now, if you choose to use Gemini CLI or Codex, they have their own version of this. They will probably ignore the Claude.md file because Gemini is looking for the Gemini MD file. So there is a little bit of extra work that you will need to do just to adjust, like I've said at the bottom there, adjust some of those files. That might be just as simple as renaming it, or you just say, please copy, hey Gemini, copy that Claude.md file and make the new file named Gemini.md, all in capitals, again, Gemini in capitals, .md in lowercase, because that's what Gemini is going to look for when it arrives in your code base. So you can make it all work. It's just you're going to have to do a little bit more work, because out of the box, everything is really built for Claude. Most of my community is using Claude Code, and certainly the wider, geekier community at large is using Claude Code at this point. So that's my recommendation. Start with Claude Code. I understand that your boss has bought the enterprise version of ChatGPT and you have to use that. Well, okay, then you have to use that, and then you'll just have to do a little bit of extra work to make all of this work for you. Or if you have to use Gemini, again, same thing. My advice would be just to master one first, ideally Claude Code. I do drop into every now and again, have a little play with Codex, have a little play with Gemini, just in case Claude Code disappears overnight, because that would be a disaster for me and my business at this point if that were to happen. So I sort of keep my eye in and practice with those others, but I wouldn't worry about trying to use all three equally. Just stick to one, just master one. And then once you've mastered it, then you can go play with the others. All right, next we'll talk about Git and GitHub. So remember that this is sort of like version control, like the save game option in a video game. We'll talk about that in the next video. See you there.